Welcome to Managing Love Intelligently. I'm Jason.
And I'm Stephen Ng, marriage and family therapist.
And I am the ghost of Walter Cronkite. I always try to come up with something, and that's, I guess, what I had when I wrote this.
Oh, wow.
Today's episode is titled, If It's Not a Communication Problem, What Is It? And I thought that we could talk about that because I've heard you mention it a few times. And
yeah, it's a pet peeve of mine. You know, where people come into the therapist's office. I think therapists have done such an inordinately good job of doing something very bad in that we've communicated to people, well, really, you two need to communicate. Mm-hmm. When actually it's readily apparent that they both speak perfectly fine English and they have no other problems communicating with anyone else in the whole planet except the one person they love the most and want to make a life with. And I'm thinking, yeah, there's some other hypotheses that would explain why they're having such a hard time other than what I would call a red herring of saying you two really need to learn how to communicate.
But a lot of people do actually come in and think that that's the problem though, right?
Chronically. I mean, like every week I have people come in my office who say that.
Okay. Well, we're going to get into this. But before we kick off the conversation, if you have a question for Steve, you can visit stephening.com and fill out the contact form. At the end of each episode, Steve will answer a listener question. So stay tuned for that. And if the podcast helps you in any way, please spread the word by sharing it with your family and friends. Subscribe, leave a review, all that fun stuff. I was in a relationship once, and believe it or not.
More than one.
Yeah, 3. But the one was definitely like, we don't know how to communicate was one of the things that I got hit with. So.
Oh, you specifically were accused of that by the other person?
Yeah, pretty much so. So what do you mean by this then? If people, because a lot of people come in, they think that it's a communication problem, but what is exactly going on with these people? Like, what is the problem, or what are people not seeing or picking up on?
Well, it's kind of like detective work, right? So just because, as you know, as a human relationships detective, I don't think the one suspect is the one. Doesn't mean that I know who did commit the crime, and or what the motivation was. But sometimes it's just readily apparent that it's not really a helpful way to approach the problem solving. So usually, what follows is the therapist will make some sort of attempt to teach people how to communicate. And I don't really think that's too helpful.
So like for example, they'll be like, so look at Jim, look at just Sally and say,
right,
that blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Learn how to speak in an I statement. Tell her how you feel.
Yeah.
And without blaming her, like instead of saying, you make me mad when you fill in the blank with whatever she did, like forget my birthday or whatever. Or she says, well, you hurt my feelings when you forgot our anniversary. Mm-hmm. You're always doing things like that. And so then the therapist says, well, let's try to avoid using always and avoid using never, because that's not going to be accurate. And then the person's brain is going to get stuck on that one thing. I think what's going on is there's a whole lot of lying out there, and there's a whole lot of cowardice out there in that when we first get together with someone, all of us are trying to put our best foot forward. We really want to make a nice impression on this person when we're first dating. And a lot of that is based on our own emotional neediness, some of which is excessive emotional neediness. And many of us are tempted to not really tell the whole truth. So I told...
Have you done that before?
Oh, me, never. I always tell all the truth.
Well, you say that you've always...
No,
made every mistake in the book.
I have made every mistake, including this one. But I'm reminded just recently of a client who happens to be in a relationship with someone who means a lot to him. He really loves her and wants their relationship to work out. And he has confessed to her that he was unfaithful in terms of looking at porn recently, his words, not mine.
And that's against the relationship that he set up?
Well, they both felt that it was a problem, and that's a story for another day. But he never did tell her that he was looking at gay porn.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh. For those at home listening to this, Jason's eyebrows went way up. So, we're all sophisticated enough to know that there are both gay and straight people in this world, and that there are any number of other flavors, including people who identify as bisexual. But this is a little part of himself he's chosen to withhold from his partner. Now, I haven't withheld anything like that specifically, but I've withheld, say, that I was irritated about something, or that a certain way we were doing things didn't really work for me, or that I really didn't like being around her family or her mother in particular, or any of that kind of stuff. And I
could also agree to some of that as well.
Well, and we do that because I think we're afraid of irrationally, and see, this is the other issue. One of the other suspects is we have irrational beliefs that we can control the feelings of another. So I'm going to shape her perception of me and her feelings that follow from that perception by carefully curating my disclosures and letting the other person know, yes, some of the truth, but maybe not the naked truth.
Because the naked truth, though, if you say it, you're going to get broken up with, or they're going to leave you. That's
the fear, right? Is that the other person is going to say, well, fine, you don't ever have to call me again. And click. And so the relationship is over. And we got rejected, and now we're on our own again. And we can't deal with that.
And is that an irrational belief?
That you can control the feelings of other people?
Like, if you be yourself, you have more chances that the person's going to leave you. Like, if you're honest.
Well, I do think that is a very rational belief. That if I really let people know who I am, they will, with much greater clarity and alacrity, get rid of me.
But they don't want to do it because they're afraid to.
They don't want to do what?
They don't want to be themselves because they're afraid.
Well, we all want to be ourselves, but we withhold that, right? Because we're trying, I believe it's accurate to say we're trying to shape the other person's perception of us and the feelings that follow from that. So the shorthand for saying that wordy sentence I just said is we all have a certain faith in our ability to control the feelings of others. And that is a fallacy. There is no way we can do this. In fact, I'm going to offer our listeners a little thought experiment to, I think, prove my point, and ask everybody listening to this just to take a moment and imagine someone you absolutely loathe, someone you detest at the extreme levels, somebody, yes, that you can even say you hate, which I looked it up, and it's not a dirty word. Even though it has only 4 letters, it just means to intensely dislike someone. And if we're all honest, I think we can admit there are a few people in this world we intensely dislike. And then I'm going to ask everyone who's listening to try, by an act of your will, to make yourself like that person, to genuinely like them, to genuinely even go far enough to say you actually love them. You don't loathe them. You absolutely love them. And can you do that? I'm waiting. No, you can't do that, because if you're honest with yourself, you have no control even over your own feelings. And you can do it in reverse with someone you really love. It's not nearly as much fun, I think, but trying to imagine yourself hating somebody you really love. Now, can you love and hate somebody at the same time? Absolutely. That's the very image of the ambivalent feelings that some people have for others. But
that's the classic relationship right there.
In Chicago.
Yeah.
But if I'm actually honest with myself, I'd have to admit I cannot control my own feelings. I like who I like. I dislike who I dislike. And that isn't etched in stone. That's a very fluid thing, because sometimes I learn to like people, sometimes I learn to hate people. But in the moment in which we're speaking, it is what it is. And then the conclusion is another question. Well, if you can't control your own feelings, how could you possibly hope to control the feelings of another? Yeah, and you may not know this at home, but Jason is bearded, and he's thinking about stroking that beard thoughtfully because it's absolutely impossible to control the feelings of another person. And that's why sometimes women and men who have no intention of being romantically involved with someone pick up a stalker. And this person is head over heels crazy, in fact, obsessed with us. And I don't think we did anything to make that happen, except, yes, we did order the same kind of coffee at Starbucks. And obviously the stars are saying that it's ordained and that we were meant to be married.
Yeah, I've had that before. The universe.
Damn Starbucks.
I'm going to follow her wherever she goes to in my car.
Right.
I've never done that, but I have had little moments like that where stuff happens and then you just.
Yeah. And you make these erroneous conclusions. And I've talked to many women and some men who have had these experiences. And it's frightening, when you do get attract the attention of a stalker. But it's based on this idea that somehow this is bigger than the both of us. Really, I checked my astrology chart and it says, so, I think it's erroneous to be thinking that two people can't communicate when they speak essentially the same language. The challenge starts with, first of all, do I even know myself?
Yeah, that's a hard thing. I mean, speaking from my own experience of dating intentionally and doing these podcasts, it's like, wow, I really didn't. It's not like I don't think I knew what I needed. I think I knew always deep down, but I didn't think that it was capable of becoming true.
That you could build such a life. That I could
build such a life.
Wow.
Yeah.
I certainly didn't have the awareness that I could build such a life, but I think I was much slower on the uptake than you because I just thought, really, I genuinely thought we just needed to be in love and we could work through everything.
I thought that too. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So, then you meet someone and you're quite sure that you can live with and overlook certain things about them. Let's say, for the person who has a sensitivity to and a sensitivity for and a dislike of cigarette smoking, and your prospect smokes cigarettes, and you're thinking, oh yeah, but everything else is perfect.
Yeah.
And I think then it's really hard when we are emotionally needy. We've been lonely for some time. We haven't really developed a life worth living yet. And we meet someone who's very attractive to us and who checks off so many boxes that we like. But then they've got this deal breaker, and it's either a universal deal breaker like domestic violence or a personal deal breaker like something as banal as cigarette smoking. And then we keep trying to wrestle our feelings and our thoughts and corral them into something where we can make the unmanageable truly manageable. And the reason we don't speak up, frankly, is fear, cowardice. We don't have the courage to just say, you know what, it's been great getting to know you a little bit, but I just don't think I'm the right guy for you. Why would you say that? And she exhales smoke into your face. Well, to tell you the truth, I just hate cigarette smoke. And, well, I could quit. Yeah, if you do and you stay off cigarettes for a while, give me a call.
Yeah.
After, say, a year.
You want to make sure it sticks.
Right? Because it's just baloney. So many people have tried. And then that's the other person's part of it, right? Is if they do meet an honest person, and you see this in sitcoms and movies all the time where somebody says, well, yeah, I really couldn't be with somebody who, and then you fill in the blank with whatever their criteria is. And, oh, well, yeah, me either. I hate eating Italian food.
Yeah.
They
just go along with it.
Yeah. They just go along with it and try to mimic the other person, or, surround themselves with some sort of verbal camouflage so that they aren't who they actually are, or at least they don't appear to be who they actually are.
Yeah.
Because after all, who doesn't like Italian food? That's just wrong. And so, I do think it's a little harder to accept that A, I don't know who I am, B, I don't know what I need, C, I don't know how to tell the truth, because D, I'm a little chicken shit.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing you have to admit to yourself before you even start dating, essentially.
Yeah, or get into that dead end in the conversation. Go home and give it a good think, and then come back and say, the other day when you said you really like sex a lot and you like to have it at least once a month, I wasn't exactly honest with you, how that would work for me. What do you mean? Do you mean you'd like it twice a month? Well, no. If I'm going to be honest, I probably could limit myself to once a day. Once a day? What are you, a sex maniac? And then, that goes from there. But really, what do I gain by winning the girl but losing my integrity and my happiness and my future by partnering up with someone with whom I'm constitutionally incompatible?
You get a boyfriend or girlfriend.
You get bragging rights to say you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, except it's a little the glow on that accomplishment really starts fading after a few months of being with the wrong person. Well, how do you know you're with the wrong person? Because you're incompatible. And you don't get together with someone's with the agenda but I can change her or I can change him. And for those of us who've done that or tried to do that, and I'm one of those flawed human beings who've done that, it's a fool's game to think, yeah, I can change somebody. I just literally don't have that power. And I'm a therapist and I can hypnotize people. And I don't even have that power to change people. People do change, and sometimes they change in response to what we say, but they don't change because of what we say. There's not a causal relationship between my telling the truth and the other person changing their lifestyle to align with my values or what I think is important. So I think it's really far more common. Maybe there are some people out there who literally don't know how to communicate. But I think it is vastly more common that we are ignorant of our own needs, and that we are so needy that we are willing to lie, and that ultimately we lack the courage to correct the record even when we realize we were wrong.
So that sort of not understanding your needs and kind of like adapting within a relationship, that is going to eventually create the problems that are going to come up later on. And they're going to think they're having a communication problem, but it's more of a compatibility problem because they didn't do their intentional interview. They didn't create a life worth living. They didn't do that sort of work prior.
Yeah. Let's say there's an incredibly beautiful movie starlet who, I introduce you to, because of course I know all of them. And she finds you just quite fascinating, and she confides in you tearfully that all of her life she's been looking for someone with whom she can share her number one passion, and your hopes are going up. And then she says, I know people think it's weird, but I love macrame and craft fairs. And that's my life. And I don't tell very many people that because I've been so rejected over the years. And you're looking at her package and she's looking pretty darn good. And
what is macrame again?
Oh, the knotting of yarns and all that stuff. And they make plant hangers and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So she confides that, and you say, you're not going to believe this, but I've been looking for the same thing. I love freaking macrame. I can't do it, but I'm a collector. And I just have always thought it's just the most amazing thing.
Yeah.
And, you're stuck with that lie. And how's that going to work out? Well, either for the rest of your life, you're going to be going to craft fairs and hating yourself.
I have been to those with my sister, my mom growing up, and it was literally like being in the depths of hell. I was so uncomfortable. It was like my skin was burning, my body was like tingling. It was like the worst thing ever.
Yeah, it was an early onset panic attack or something.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, very much.
So, but those are the kinds of lies that we tell each other, and it's foolish and it's crazy, because even if I put quotes around the word "get," even if I get the girl or she gets the guy, really, you did it under duplicitous circumstances. You were a liar. And that's the foundation of your relationship. That's not going to work. I mean, that is never going to work out happily. It might be far more helpful to take the risk and to say, well, I got to tell you, I'm one more of the bad ones.
Yeah.
I want to lie to you so bad because you're so beautiful. And I would love to get to know you better, but I, too, am one of those crazy people who do not like craft fairs. And you never know what she's going to do. That might be the day where she comes out of her irrational belief and realizes, hey, wait a minute, I could have a great relationship with a good man, even if he doesn't like craft fairs.
So she could go to them herself.
Yeah, or with girlfriends.
Yeah. And she doesn't need him. Because a lot of times I feel like people are always, I want a guy to do this with me or this or blah, blah, blah. And women saying that, and then men saying the same thing. Obviously, you have your backpacking story that we've discussed numerous times, but...
Yeah, I was going to tell it again, but forget it now. Yeah, because my present wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, confronted me in the same sort of a way, and explained very kindly that she would never go on any kind of backpacking trip. She's not that kind of person.
And you were, though, like set on having a woman who did that. You're like, I need this in my life.
Because I knew that I really liked that. And you know what? I was wrong. I do like it. I like being out in nature and I like backpacking, but you know what I like even more? I like intimacy and I like love. And for me to be with a partner who had the courage to tell me, no, that's not who I am. And for my little brain to be presented with this new fact about this human being and to think, well, do I really need that? I mean, because she's hitting like everything else I can imagine. And then 1,000 other points I hadn't even thought of.
Yeah.
Then, in terms of the relationship being wonderful, could I get by with going backpacking by myself or with a buddy? And of course I could.
Yeah.
So, you just don't know if you're going to get that reception or if the other person is going to say, well, thanks for being honest, I guess. I'll see you around.
Yeah. And you could get either one. That's the thing about it. So it's
absolutely,
you have to, and you're saying to get over that fear and then say the truth and see what happens.
Right.
That's the hard part because of the neediness and all that.
And I have a somewhat sexy story as well. I was dating a beautiful woman who was really appealing to me. She seemed so kind and so intelligent. And I was like, I was really desirous of getting to know her better. And in a moment on a date, we were out to dinner and she said, she confided that she had been hurt by somebody who had an affair during their relationship. And she disclosed that she could never, ever be with anyone who had ever cheated in a relationship. And I was at a place in my life, I thank the universe, I was at a place in my life where I had started to develop a life worth living and I was comfortable with myself. And I knew I wanted to have a relationship based on integrity and on honesty. and genuine love, where somebody could love me for who I am. And I had to disclose to her right then and there, well, I might not be the right guy for you then, because I have done that in my past. And she looked so crestfallen, and her face fell, and she stared at the table for, the longest 30 seconds of my life. And then she said, I think I need you to take me home. And I said, yeah, okay. And I did. And no drama. I didn't try to talk her into anything. I didn't try to bring her around. I just let her, have what was important to her. And I went forward with my life.
Did you talk during that drive, or was it kind of like a silent, like after she said that, it was just...
It was pretty silent. There might have been some perfunctory, little exchange, but it was minimal. And then, part of what gave me real confidence was I was already, a therapist, but I also had been a man for a number of years. And I knew that everybody makes sexual mistakes. And we may not all have made exactly the same mistakes, but we've all made some sort of mistake. And if she was looking for some form of perfection that, had eluded me, I knew she was going to have a really hard time finding that with any guy, because the temptation with her, I think most guys would have said, oh yeah, me too. I just could never be with anybody who, so thus begins the lying and the false foundation for the relationship.
Do you feel that once that happens one time, that it becomes more common throughout? Like once you tell one lie?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Just like a snowball coming down an avalanche. Yeah. Right. Like my eyes get all big, and it's like, yeah, because, that's once I have abandoned my values, including things like truth, integrity, and in this case, I would add, and love, because it's not very loving to do that to somebody.
Yeah.
And it's very much unloving of myself to start lying and posturing as if I'm something that I'm not. And I'm never going to end up being loved, because the other person, I may end up with the person, but whatever feelings she might have for me are based on a lie. So I'm not really loved. So that's really pretty awful.
Yeah.
And I think once you get into that, where would you stop?
Yeah. Well, I feel like too, like some people say that's just the way it is. Like that's the way relationships work. I shouldn't tell my partner some things, or they don't need to know some things. It's better they don't know these things.
Yeah, I've heard that from other people. But I would urge everyone who's listening to pause for a moment and ask yourself, would you want that person to lie to you about something that at that time you considered very important? And most of us would say, no, I would really like to know what I'm getting into. If the secret the other person carries is about something that's really important to me, then yes, I would like to know, even if it's disappointing and if I have to move on with my life. And so if I want that from the other person, you probably internally know they want that from you as well. So now I'm just living a lie. I mean, who wants their one true love to be that person who's just living a lie?
I've had experiences where friends have done that. And I thought that thing that you thought about, I can't be in a relationship where I was lying like that, but then they seem to be okay with it.
Yeah. And I think that feeling okay with it is really okay for all of us, so long as we don't think. Because if you think about things and you become self-aware and you realize, yeah, the reality that I have in my relationship is not really a reality. It's a charade. It's a phantom. It's a mirage. It's all based on a house of cards, not on some firm bedrock of truth and genuine love for who we are. that makes it really hard to have. And, we talk all the time on these podcasts about the nature of the word intimacy. What does it mean? And we've defined it. Yeah.
Hugging people.
Okay, ladies. He's just saying that. He doesn't really believe it. But, it's about being safely sharing our lives with one another. Mm-hmm. And if I'm so fearful that I can't find safety in being who I am, even when the other person's not threatening, like the woman I was talking about a moment ago, she wasn't threatening me. She was letting me know who she was. Mm-hmm. And I thought it deserved an honest response.
Yeah.
And, somewhat ironically, I suppose, but that woman did call me a year later.
Okay.
Because I think she learned, almost every guy out there has done this, and almost every guy out there is going to lie about it. I was dating the one honest man in my life, and she just wanted to know if I was available,
really?
To go out. And
did she mention that about that at all, or did she?
No, we didn't go there because I let her know I was already involved with a woman who later, as it turns out, turned into my wife. And so I wasn't really available anymore.
Wow.
And I would have hated to have made the same kind of decision. I've done even worse things. Talk about chicken. Mm-hmm. I have been tremendously attracted to women who, at least on the surface, were everything I was looking for. They were intelligent, courageous, of course, beautiful, and all of that. And I just, for whatever reason, didn't have the courage to ask them out.
Yeah.
Then I called back 6 months later, and I finally worked up the courage. And what a surprise! It's too late because people move on.
Yeah.
And one woman that this happened with, most of them I never called back because I was because of this one experience.
But you got their numbers though.
Well, or it was easy enough to find out because we'd gotten to know each other well enough to know where they worked. And she said, "Why didn't you say something back then?" And boy, there was the painful moment of truth.
Yeah.
Just to admit that I was too self-conscious or too shy or too afraid to speak up. And I just felt like such a loser facing that truth about myself. So instead, I
feel
like
I'm still finally working myself out of that.
It's hard.
It's hard to do that. Because I'll be like, oh, well, she's too pretty, or what does she want with me? Or I don't have anything to offer. But then I find little hints like that. Like I could have had a chance if I just had the courage to approach.
Well, I'm going to say this for everybody else out there who's in your position in that story. And I've been in that position, obviously, but to invite the other person out for coffee. I just really enjoyed getting to know you, and I'd like to get to know you better.
Yeah.
So it isn't necessarily romantic or, a date in the sense of a rendezvous with a romantic / sexual agenda.
Yeah.
It could be coffee and genuinely getting to know them, which for me, actually now, I'm that sort of person who just really savors the pleasure of getting to know people. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a tremendous privilege to be invited to share a half hour or an hour of somebody's life where they're letting me in and letting me know what's going on with them. And I really savor those moments, whether it's a man or a woman. And for me, if I were suddenly single, I know I would still have that same mindset because I have developed a life worth living. I am comfortable and happy with myself. And I am comfortable with not being the right guy for every woman I find attractive. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, what we have to get through. Yeah. One of the things I would say, maybe, I don't know if it's in closing or how much time we have left, but, the whole focus on getting a boyfriend, getting a girlfriend, that's not really what we're supposed to be doing. I think we're not supposed to be getting a girlfriend. We're supposed to be getting the right girl for us.
Yeah.
She's supposed to be getting the right guy for her. And it echoes from the Bible's pages, many are called, but few are chosen. Yeah. So you can have a girlfriend and then you can have another girlfriend and another girlfriend, but it's not like they're generic parts that you can just swap out one for another.
Yeah.
I just need somebody because I want to have somebody to date. Mm-hmm. You can date without having a girlfriend. You can date, just asking an individual out one time. And if it's a truly great relationship with a great connection and you have a lot of compatibility, it's going to work itself into that second date and the third date and so on, quite organically, quite naturally. You don't have to sweat it. But if you're getting rejected, that's okay, because none of us want to be with someone who can take us or leave us, or even worse yet, really is not that into us. But they stayed because they were really needy and afraid they couldn't do better. How horrible would that be?
Yeah.
To be that choice. I don't want to be that choice. Mm-hmm. So yeah, part of this whole getting to know the other person does require tremendous courage. And even for those of us who speak a different language, literally, than the person we're dating, there's a way to be courageous even in those situations. I think it is really challenging to date somebody from another culture who speaks a different language and where we have a minimal amount of language in common. But it is possible to make that work. Yeah. It just requires a lot of courage.
What are your thoughts on people say the first date, just, oh, I love you. You're just the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Like, I think they call it like love bombing, like that sort of experience, like just dumping all this like love and affection on a person. Like, if it's true to you, is that good because you are that person? Or is that always, do you think, an act that the person's kind of holding out that will eventually fade away? Because it's impossible to be that sort of in that romantic zone all the time.
Well, we have talked about this before, and I think both men and women hear that kind of response, and they get that kind of attention. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, and I think everyone can see this as soon as I say it, no one can love you until they get to know you.
Yeah.
And to be love bombed like that in the first week of a relationship, or even the first month of a relationship, is really, duplicitous. It's a lie. Mm-hmm. And if nothing else, that person saying that is at least self-deceived. Now, there is some modicum of truth there in which they can say, well, to the degree that I know you, I am crazy about you. Or, they may know one or two facts about you, and they just appreciate it so much that in an extravagance of verbiage, they say, God, I just love you. Mm. And I think we can tell from context what that means.
Yeah.
Because the person who's love bombing you, they really don't know what you typically do in your worst moments. Mm-hmm. And they don't know much about your history of flawed relationships, breakups, the terrible mistakes you've made in your life. And it's not that those things are the be all and end all, but they are a part of my story and of what makes me me. Mm-hmm. So coming to grips with the idea that, hey, guess what? There's nobody perfect out there. There's no sinless human waiting for you to call them today. No, they're all flawed. Everybody has got their rough edges and their scars, and getting to know those and deciding, can I live with that or not? Mm. And that's, for some of us, the answer is no, I can't live with that. And for other people, the answer is, oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
I'm totally okay with that.
Yeah.
So for me, in terms of, I don't think we've talked too much about this, but this is not a thing I'm really proud of, but in terms of cleanliness or tidiness in the home, I know there's the expression, cleanliness is next to godliness, which is some rubbish somebody came up with some time long ago.
Yeah, just because it rhymed.
Yeah, it's just simply not true. But I do have a comfort zone. And if on a scale of cleanliness and tidiness, 1 to 10, I was, say, a 7 or an 8, and I met someone who was perfect for me, perfect in every way. She's an amazing woman. And then I find out, yeah, she's at 2 on this, and her dirty clothes are all over the house. And there are dirty dishes from meals a week ago still on her counters. I don't think I need to judge her. That's not what this conversation is about. It's about compatibility.
Yeah.
So it's not about judging her as, oh my God, she's a terrible housekeeper. Oh my God, she's, a filthy, pig. It's not like that. It's more like, yeah, I would come across as fussy to a woman like that. And I don't want to be spending the rest of my life running around behind her, picking up things and wiping down counters and that kind of thing.
And that's also you letting her be who she is and not trying to change her as well.
Yeah. And sometimes that's appreciated, but most of the time people get judgmental in reverse when you say, I just don't think I'm the right guy for you. I'm really kind of a fussy housekeeper in comparison to you. Not because I've met 10s and I know I'm not a 10.
Yeah.
I've met people who are like borderline OCD and people who are 9s, just very, very orderly all the time. And I'm not nearly as organized as that. However, I am somewhere on that continuum above a 5, I would say. And wherever I am, the gap between me and some people is just too much for me to tolerate. And yes, ultimately that too is about me. Yeah. It's, there's this thing about communication, right? I can never communicate to you or anyone else about anything without communicating myself. So when I say, no, I'm not really comfortable with that, that's not going to work for me, the listener has a chance to take that in and understand that's not him being judgmental. That's him sharing who he is.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then you can listen to people effortlessly, even when they're not saying it the perfect way according to the therapist who might be coaching them how to communicate. No, this isn't going to work for me, sister. You're a pig. I can't live like this. Well, he didn't say it in a sanitized, helpful way, but the end result is the same. Would any woman who was being spoken to in that way really want that guy for her leading man in that epic motion picture that is her future?
Yeah.
I think not. I would advise her to take a pause and just think about things and, where she's going, because that's not going to work.
No. So all of this stuff, it's about before they're even in a relationship, showing up as who you authentically are and having the courage to do that. And also the understanding of what you need. And that's going to keep you probably out of therapy and communicating in a much more effective way.
Well, and there's things I don't say enough, and I'll just repeat this. This is going to be a way to proactively prevent marital crises by letting somebody know who I really am. But what about the millions of people who are unhappily married in this country?
Yeah, like how did those people do who they've been having these little lies and these little deceptions and not hiding who they are and vice versa?
Well, they go to marriage and family therapists and pay thousands and thousands of dollars to be taught how to speak the language they already speak. And then they end up sounding like they are therapists and speaking in like sanitized terms where every truth is handled as if it were a hazmat object and disclosed in the most careful possible way. In fact, I've even been exposed to therapists and clients who've told me their last therapist said, well, Susan's willing to compromise with you, John. Would you be willing to stop talking about your need for a safe relationship that's respectful? And John will usually say, well, I'll stop talking about it if she'll stop abusing me. And then they all throw their hands up in the air and, well, that's never going to work. Well, and what we have, see, it's hard because then once you're married, you've got a house together, you have kids together. That's a big mess. And it is really hard for people. But I would argue still, even for those people who built their home or their relationship on a foundation of sand and lies, to be able to at some point take their mate by the hand, to look into their eyes and say, look, I just realized how much I have really deceived you and never let you in on who I really am. And I don't know that I can let you know everything about me, but I'd like to begin being a more honest person with you. Does that sound interesting to you? And those are frightening words. And quite understandably, a lot of spouses do say, I don't know. I don't know if I want you to be honest with me. And that really, that answer is so frightening in itself, because that takes us all the way back to square one. And really, they're telling me that they might very well be okay with the lies just continuing for the next 20 or 30 years. And that just sounds, for me, that just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I just, because for me, I don't just want a person sharing, the same apartment or the same house. I really want to have a connection that is significant and meaningful. And if it's based on deception, it's so highly flawed that I find it unsatisfying. So, yeah, it's bad news for the people who got married under these conditions. The good news is there is a way out, and that's telling the truth. The bad news there is you're back to the beginning and you're taking a chance, because the other person may decide, yeah, if you don't like craft fairs, you're no man of mine.
Well, let's wrap it up there, because you brought it back. And so we'll wrap it up there. And to end, as always, we have a listener question. So if you have a question for Steve, you can visit stevening.com and fill out the contact form. This week's question is as follows. Hi, Steve. I'm recently divorced only 2 months ago after a nearly 20-year marriage. I am dating a really nice guy that I like a lot, but he's already talking about getting married. I don't know how to tell him that I do not want to consider marriage at all for a long time. What can I say to him that won't hurt his feelings? From Happy to Live Alone Lady.
Oh my gosh, this question is like plucked right out of our conversation. So she has a truth about herself. I'm no interest in marriage at this time in her life.
Yeah.
And she hasn't yet told him. And and it's not that she doesn't have the words. She has the words. She doesn't have the courage. So for her sake, I'm hoping that she takes a look at herself and realizes this is one of those times where instead discretion is not the better part of valor. It's not helpful to keep your truth to yourself. It's going to be very helpful to go out for coffee or in some other public venue and to say, hey, you've really made it clear you'd like to get married sometime to me. Is that still the case? Oh, yeah, I absolutely. Well, I haven't been honest with you about that. I want to be. And then you gently and lovingly let him know who you are and what you're about. And for some guys, well, that's it. It's over.
Yeah.
But for a lot of guys, they're going to have a hard time taking no for an answer, and they're going to keep, assailing the castle, so to speak, trying to break down the defenses to get what they want. And the problem I have with that, especially after 2 months of dating, or if it's been longer, is it's just not long enough for him to even say he knows who she is.
Yeah.
And he's going for the finish line of the marathon, sprinting with all he's got, and he's still in the first 100 yards of the race.
Some neediness there on his end.
Absolutely. And that tells me, if I'm in her shoes, it tells me he's far needier and less comfortable with himself than is healthy for anybody. And she may choose to, say something about that or not. But I highly recommend that she let him know at the same time, I need to expand my dating, and I would like to keep dating you if you're interested, but I'm going to start dating other people.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. So thank you for the question. Thank you, Steve. And thank you all for listening. And we'll catch you all in the next episode.
Good night and good luck.
Signing off. No, that was great though. I really appreciate.
Yeah, I just really admire the courage of people, including you, and with all humility, I can include myself. It takes a lot of courage to go from a place of fear to a place of courage, and where I can speak up and tell the other person who I really am. And that's really hard to do when the energy is all going the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
So anybody listening to this, please know you have my heartfelt thanks and encouragement to continue, carry on.
And I'll just say it's a lot more freeing if you just be yourself.
You found it to be so?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have too. And I've been at this a long, long time. And I do recommend to everybody to jump on into the truth. The water is great.
Yeah, it's great temperature. All right, I'll see y'all next time.
Bye now.